Hey, Amanda, thanks so much for making time today.
Great to be here. Thanks, David.
The people who listen to these podcasts always love to hear interesting journeys. And since I've gotten to know you over the last few years, I thought you'd make a great subject and be able to provide wonderful insights. So thanks so much. Um, First, start by telling us a little bit about what you're currently doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CEO of my own company. It's called Magnitude Global Finance, and we're a boutique consulting firm that provides, we mostly work in like financial structuring related to predominantly climate finance and renewable energy. And I have my clients are mostly like government, like USAID, the Asian Development Bank, sort of international donors and lenders. And I work with them to help either them on that side to structure deals or on the client side to structure an investment.
Nice. And how long you typically do big projects, small projects, drop in? What type of engagements do you typically do?
Yeah, it really varies. Some of my work has been quite long. I have a project right now with the Asian Development Bank in Tonga that's been going on for 2.5 years, where we're working with them to procure solar energy. But then I've also worked on the other side of things where I'll do like a due diligence for a client. So that may be somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks.
Oh, nice. And what do you enjoy most about what you currently do?
I really like sort of it combines really what I'm good at, which is finance and numbers, with doing good, which is more what I'm passionate about. So helping to, get a renewable energy project off the table, helping to structure a complicated financial instrument to solve a complicated solution, like, a marine conservation project or aquaculture or something like that, that isn't sort of your typical investment, typical structure.
Wow. So the question is, how did you get there? So in college, one day you wake up and you go, you know what I want to do? I want to work for the people of Tonga to help them with a marine. How did you get here? What did you study in college?
Yeah, no, it's been a lifelong dream since I was 3 to work in Tonga. Yeah. No, I think in college, I was always interested in international. I think my family, I had my mother and an uncle who had traveled the world, and I'd always grown up hearing these stories. So I knew I wanted to do something international. And then I've always been, I don't know, sort of a bleeding heart, I guess. I wanted to do good. So I studied international studies, and then out of school worked actually on some USAID type projects. So, some of that doing good. But it was really more the work that I was doing as sort of a junior person was really focused on kind of admin and project management. And I wanted to get into more of the technical space, actually doing the work. And so I had about 7 years before I went to graduate school, and I was working with like local governments and in developing countries, and really seeing that, the economic development in these communities were really sort of stagnant in a lot of places, just not a lot of businesses, not a lot of anything going on. And I realized that, private sector, there was a big role for private sector and finance and investment to play in that space. But I didn't have that background at all. I just knew that there was something there, but I'd been sort of very much on the government side for my early career. And so I realized I needed to learn sort of how the other half worked, so to speak. And so that's when I decided to apply to business school. And so I was fortunate enough to get into Wharton, and I actually did a joint degree with Johns Hopkins SAIS and Wharton. And really, I realized I really needed to hone sort of a hard skill. And so went into finance, and got that. And, throughout the process, I started down that sort of typical path that those of us who've been through the MBA program, are familiar with, recruiting for consulting firms, recruiting for the investment banks. But I'd been based in Washington and kind of wanted to stay in DC. So there were fewer options. So a little bit of a default, I wound up at a group that was a private equity firm that was investing in renewable energy projects. And so that really sort of checked a couple of those boxes for me, sort of using that skill that, I think I'm fairly good at, which is finance and then doing good. And so it sort of rolled into it from there. I went to that firm and then worked with another private equity fund that actually developed geothermal energy. And then got into the entrepreneurship purely by default. The company ran out of money and I got laid off. And so I started consulting just to pay the bills, that sort of stopgap, assuming that I would find some other gig at some point, a full-time gig. And that was in 2013. And so it's been 9 years that I've been doing consulting, and I found that I really like it. I like the diversity of the client work. I like that I can work on so many different things, sort of in that climate space. So a fairly broad spectrum, from, sort of the more traditional renewable energy projects to things like I mentioned, aquaculture or climate adaptation. So that's sort
Would you
of how
say
I
that,
landed here.
yeah, would you say that along the way you kind of had like a guiding star, like you really wanted to get more personally involved and then made decisions along the way to help facilitate that? You mentioned like developing some hard skills, right?
Yeah, it's been a combination of sort of, falling into things and being more deliberate. So obviously the business school was a very deliberate decision. The getting into renewable energy was a bit of falling into it, just because at the time Washington was very much a one company town. It's becoming more entrepreneurial now, but that was back in 2006. And so there weren't as many options, especially in the sort of, both using finance to do good space. So fell into that. But then, as I have developed my career sort of post business school, I did work a lot in geothermal, as I mentioned, which was because I worked for that fund. And started getting a bit pigeonholed into that. All of the work that I was getting was really around geothermal. So I did sort of look to really expand my skill set and my client base deliberately and start, just really kind of putting my name out there and saying, I do more than just geothermal. I do renewable energy. I can do climate, and rebranding myself a bit as sort of a climate finance expert. And I've been fairly successful with that. I still have a fair amount of geothermal projects, but I have a pretty good balance of other stuff as well.
You said you were an accidental entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
But you're successful because you've been doing this for almost a decade now. Would you go back to doing big corporate, or you're enjoying what you're doing now? Or
yeah, it's a good question. It's one I struggle with a lot, actually, because I think one of the challenges in having your own firm, particularly when you're smaller, like I am, is having a platform. You really have to build that platform and that brand recognition and that name recognition. It doesn't come automatically like when you're with a large firm. And some of the client work, while I enjoy it, there's times when, as a consultant, you do a project and then you just sort of leave it, and you hope that it takes off or that something happens, but you sort of jump from one to another, and you don't have as much say over, oh, I'd really like to now direct this project and see it come to fruition, or I'd like to implement those wonderful recommendations I made in that report. And so with a company or something, you may have more of that opportunity, both for developing a platform and then leading it. But obviously there's lots of trade-offs with the bureaucracy, which I don't have any staff meetings, that sort of thing where there's huge trade-offs. So I don't know. It would, for the right opportunity, I would consider it if I were able to have a platform and be directing things. But otherwise, I kind of like my gig.
Cool. The current gig that you're doing, is it the longest that you've been in one place?
With my company? Yeah. Yes, it is.
The previous jobs were shorter in duration,
somewhere between 2 and 5 years, probably, at each place before that. Yeah.
Nice. What do you anticipate next? Like for the foreseeable future, you're enjoying what you're doing, or if you look back, I guess a broader question would be, as you look back upon how you've gotten here, are there specific skills or insights that you'll use as you look forward to what you want to do in the future?
Yeah, I think that really I'm sort of at a point right now, in my career where I think that next deliberate step is coming. And I've thought, for about the last year or so, I've thought through sort of that decision between sort of the big corporate versus entrepreneurial, growing my company versus sort of steady state. That, I think my company's successful now. I make a good living. I like what I do. But, as I noted, I sort of, just go with what clients ask me to do, which again, great network of clients, and that's good. But I've, developed this skill set over so many years and have a lot of insights and stuff from everything that I've seen. And so, feel like I have something to say about that. And so it's sort of, how do I want to do that? Do I want to, again, look for a sort of a pre-built platform? or do I want to, and am I able to, do I have the time to build that platform, through magnitude, in terms of both growing as a company, as well as, putting the brand out there a bit more deliberately, to be able to more direct conversations rather than just contribute.
Right. Have mentors or bosses played a positive or negative role in your career over the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really, really blessed to have two tremendous mentors very early in my career. One of my first bosses, she just really took me under her wing. This was when I was working with local government. She'd been a former city manager, she's just a really dynamic leader, and really encouraged me. Got me my first overseas assignment. I mean, she just always was looking for opportunities for me. In fact, I went in one day and asked her at a review, she said, "Oh, what do you want to do in the next year?" And I said, "Well, if there are any overseas opportunities with our organization, I'd be very interested in doing that." And the next day she offered me a job going to Indonesia.
Oh.
So careful what you ask for, but it's also good. And she's now a dear, dear friend. It's been a lifelong friend for the past 25 years. And then more recently, about 10 years ago, met a fellow Wharton alum who's, a few years older, not that much older, but much more successful in this space. And she's in finance and investments and works in climate change. And she's just been a tremendous advisor to me, looks for opportunities, and, we just really get along. And so, yeah, I've been really fortunate to have sort of two really great mentors there. Have had plenty of negative experiences as well, which I think we all learn from, but focusing on the positive, I have two great mentors in my life who I both consider friends, as well as, they giving me guidance.
Yep. So the two things that stuck out to me so far in your conversation, in your journey, were, you mentioned, intentionality and like just luck, right? Just falling into certain things and certain things happening. As you look back, what advice would you give to people in terms of mapping out their own career journey, regardless of what career they might choose?
Yeah. I think, a couple of things I would think about is to every so often, whether it's every couple of years or every 5 years, depends, really sit back and think about where you're headed. A lot, like you said, we fall into a lot of things, we luck into things, or we luck out of things. And, think about that. Like, is this where you want to go? And if it isn't, then think about, what is it that you need? Is it a skill set? Whether it's a certification, whether it's just reading up on a, new technology or something like that. So really think about that and, sort of have those intentional moments, every so often. And then I think, one thing for sure, don't be afraid to ask. And I need to take this advice, myself as well. But I got to Indonesia just by asking, and I've had a few of those moments in my career where that's happened. The worst thing someone can say is no. And you're not any better or worse off. And then the final thing, somebody said to me once when I was quite young in my career and was really struggling, I was really trying to, advance as quickly as I could. And I was coming up against a lot of headwind. And my boss at the time, this great guy, was just very relaxed. He said, "Amanda, you just can't take everything so personally. It's not about you." And I think, that was really a moment for me, because really, you're right. Everybody's just out there struggling. Everyone else is trying to get ahead and do all these things. And so that sort of, being empathetic towards people, but also giving myself a break, I think was good. And it helps to, give you a little bit more confidence, and also kind of push away some of that personalization that I think some of us, we tend to internalize a bit too much. So those are kind of the three things that I've learned in my career.
Well, that's awesome. Amanda, thank you so much, Amanda Lonsdale, for sharing your insights, your journey. I wish you continued success, and thank you again for a wonderful inspiration.
Thanks, David. It was a real pleasure.